All right, Dr. Ray Gorman, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. For all listeners, this is my first guest coming on the podcast postpartum. So I'm like back in the swing of things. I'm excited to talk to an adult about PT related things. I'm excited. I talked a little bit about you in the intro, but for people that still want a little bit more info, can you just explain what the blended practice model is?
Yeah. For me, practicing, I always felt like something was missing. Like I always felt like the way that I wanted to practice was not aligned with just doing things in person. And so I had a period of time where I was doing things in my cash-based business fully in person. And I like I said, I felt like there was something missing. At the time, I was also working for a company where everything I was doing was online. And I kind of saw this like new reality that like, oh, I can get clients results, without ever seeing them in person. What would happen if I kind of had the best of both worlds and blended these two things together? And so really like the blended practice model for me was kind of born out of necessity of just feeling like I didn't fit in a traditional clinical box. Being a client at one point, tearing my ACL and going through that experience, I wish I had something like this when I was a patient going through that, where it's like I could just do all this on my own. And I'm not really a person that likes to choose sides. I like to figure out like how I can have the best of both worlds. It's a common theme in my life. And so basically like what I started to do was I started to layer in what we now call a prescriptive exercise program into my in-person practice. And we basically sold packages of sessions. We layered that prescriptive exercise program with that clients, which is an asynchronous virtual offer. And so it allowed me to do what I always wanted to do as a rehab professional. It allowed me to get paid for like the things I was doing outside of the clinic. It allowed me to become more of like an injury manager rather than just like an home exercise program provider. And it ultimately allowed me to scale without people within my business.
Okay, so for somebody like me who has just mostly a cash-based business in person is mostly what my focus is.
Yeah.
How would I start to implement, if I wanted to, the blended practice model into my plans of care? What does that look like in terms of do people come see you for a certain amount of visits with the planned knowledge that then they're going to sort of graduate to this more virtual model?
Yeah. So I think that there are like three phases of implementation that I see when people put a virtual offer within their in-person business. And the first phase is how you've described it, right? You've basically said, look, if we're going to create this customer journey for rehab clients who are going to move back into some sort of fitness mechanism, it makes total sense that we see them in person and then we put them on a prescriptive exercise program, for example. The problem, and that like kind of can work sometimes. The problem with that though, is you're trying to make another sale where you kind of have this invisible problem. Like our clients don't understand that once they're out of pain, like workload is the next thing that needs to be established. Capacity is the next thing that needs to be established. Our clients are hearing, hey, Ronnie, like this sounds great, but like my knee doesn't hurt anymore. And I just went and ran 3 miles. I think I'm good. And we know that like that is not how it works. So that's kind of phase one, right? A lot of people come into our community and our program and they try that and they hit those exact problems. Phase two is like we inch it up closer. We say like, okay, well now we're going to implement the prescriptive exercise program at like visit number 4 or 5. And that works better. But what I actually did in my practice was I started it at session number 1. So one of the things that I absolutely hated in the cash PT realm was I hated that every month started at 0. It like drove me crazy. I hated that every month started at 0. I hated that, if clients canceled, there wasn't other revenue coming in from them, right? I hated the revenue roller coaster that I was kind of on. And so I had decided like, In my practice, I am going to sell an in-person plan of care and a virtual offer for 90% of my clients at session number 1, right? There will be some clients that are too acute. Their severity is too high. I need to give them real-time feedback in our sessions. I'm not going to put those people on a PEP early. There might be some people that don't have the training IQ to go on a PEP early. And so those are going to be the people that I kind of push out into, a little bit later in the journey. But we operate with what we call like a layered revenue system, where layer number 1 is traditional sessions, whether that's packages or per visit. And then layer number 2 is actually getting clients onto this virtual asynchronous offer right off the bat.
And so in order to avoid having to make that second sale per se, you are really on visit number 1, assuming that visit number 1 is in person, already introducing then. Also, we offer this PEP. This is going to be this asynchronous offering where we're doing things virtually, but I'm still managing your program. Is there any pushback or difficulty with that sale necessarily?
If you don't tee it up correctly, for sure.
Yeah. So how do you tee it up? I'm so curious.
So for me, when I look back at how I was practicing and what was like the crux of why were so many of my clients on this prescriptive exercise program versus like other people who I know have tried to implement this. A big thing that I used to study a lot, read a lot of research on when I was practicing was Tim Gabbett's chronic workload, all of like chronic workload, return to sport, things like that. So one of the key, let me backtrack for a second. I think it's really important that every cash clinic has a system that all clients go through, a system of explanation where your eval looks a certain way. And so why I bring that up is because what we kind of teach is we teach that system, but one of the key pieces is a return to sport presentation that we have our clients give. The whole goal of the return to sport presentation is talking about, for a lot of clients that come into Cash PT, it's, well, traditional PT failed, right? Like traditional PT didn't work for me. And so it's through the frame of so that this doesn't happen again, right? So that you don't go back to running X amount of miles per week and then you fall off the cliff and you're back in pain. Then we have the clients where like maybe we've been their first stop and it's like, so that this doesn't happen. Because this is what happens when people get out of pain is they tend to think everything's okay. They go back to their old volume, they spike, they can't hold on long enough, and then they fall off and they're back in this cycle of re-injury. So as I saw that pattern in my practice, I was like, man, what is missing from this? It's something that extends beyond the clinic, because what we see in Cash PT is we see that as clients get closer to returning to sport, what happens to visit volume? It goes down.
Right. We're once a week, once every other week, when in reality,
once a month.
You probably need to be like having more touch points with them as they're increasing load more frequently. Right.
Yes. And so it's like, I need to be having a touch point with you like at least 3 times per week. But it doesn't make sense for me to have you pay $600 a week if I'm charging $200 a session for me just to watch you accumulate volume. So for my clientele, it was like we did the return to sport presentation. We made sure that in the way that we present the offer, we're getting these little micro agreements. We're asking them, why do you think this is valuable? Why do you think this will solve your problem? And a lot of times what's happening is they're actually pointing out the things of the PEP, which then makes the presentation of it much easier.
Okay, I got it. Do you still currently practice in person and virtually, or are you mostly focusing on coaching at this point?
I don't. Yeah, I am fully in on the coaching and consulting side at this point.
That is really cool. Is that something that you foresaw when you opened up your cash-based practice however many years ago?
Not at all. Not at all.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah, it's so funny. So I think life is just like a big experiment of figuring out what we like, what we don't like, why we like it, why we don't like it. And for me, I think having my cash-based business was a great step into entrepreneurship. I think it was like the catalyst for me of like understanding a lot of these things, figuring out a business model that worked for me. One of the things that I quickly realized about myself in the PT space was I'm like a big puzzle guy. So I love like the evaluation, and then I would get like really bored in the treatment process. And so when I moved into doing more like business operation stuff, I worked, like I said, I worked for a company where everything we did was online at one point. And I was like, wow, like the back end of business, like I always knew I wanted to be in business. I think I actually got kind of, swayed into the healthcare field from, parental influence rather than like from what Ray wanted to do.
Oh, okay.
I always had this kind of like something about the business world really called to me. But as I kind of was working for this company, I was like, man, like this is like, there's so many puzzles to solve here. And there's so many different ways that we can do things. And the other thing that I'm a big, proponent of is efficiency. So it's like, how do I create processes in this business that are more efficient? How do I create processes in my business that are more efficient? And so that was kind of the thing that swayed me more into, the business consulting realm.
Interesting. Okay, so your company is now, it's called Engage Movement, correct?
Yeah.
And you coach people on how to implement this blended practice model into their lives.
Yep.
Is there anybody else that's doing what you're doing that you know of? Because I don't think I've necessarily come across it.
There's other people that I think are doing, hybrid style kind of things, but everybody has their own like spin and flavor on it. And when I kind of see the way that, again, this isn't like talking bad about those other models, but it's like when I kind of see the way that those things are implemented, it usually ends up being that it's one of the problems that we've run into because, again, I've done this for so long and we just kind of have to make some of these slight tweaks to actually make it work. Like, so some people are selling plans of care and then they're selling like a one size fits all program that's delivered through an app that's delivered asynchronously. Some people are doing where it is a fitness offer on the back end, right? And that kind of solves that problem. But again, like the big thing that I think makes us stand out is this is like part of the process. Like this is day one, part of the process. This is recurring revenue from the first visit. And I think that's one of the things that kind of makes our model unique.
Gotcha. So in the puzzle that is Engage Movement, what you've figured out is introducing this concept day one, makes it an easier sell. And also, I think probably better educates the patient because they're going to understand from day one and then moving forward, like this is the reasoning behind what we're planning on doing. And this is how we're going to get you better, not necessarily faster, but more efficiently, I guess.
100%. And there were clients when I was practicing where, I wouldn't even see them in person. They would come in for an in-person assessment and I would say, look, like you have patellar tendinopathy. I don't really need to like put my hands on you or watch you squat or make, decisions in between our sessions. So I'm going to put you directly into a PEP. We're going to do some heavy slow resistance protocol throughout the next 12 weeks. We're going to implement some return to sport principles. And this is going to happen over the next 4, 6, 7 months. One of the interesting things that I think has happened in the cash PT realm, you kind of touched on it, is providers have kind of gone into this like, well, we get you better faster, but like that's not how workload accumulation works.
True.
So if I know that it's going to take me 4 weeks to accumulate just a baseline chronic workload, like that's almost a month, right? So now I need to take that workload and I can only progress it so much month over month. So like it just felt like this natural alignment of, an evidence-based process plus something that layers really nicely in the business for a way that really opened up the door for me to practice a little bit more freely.
I'm curious what you've seen now since you're focused solely on coaching other businesses up. We talked a little bit about about this before I hit record, how Taylor and Megan, you've worked with them. They're
Yeah.
both physios or physical therapists. I know Taylor, she does 100% virtual, like no in-person assessments. And then I'm sure you have people that maybe hop on to coach with you and they're like me and they do basically 100% in person.
Yeah.
Where do you see things trending in terms of how people use your services? Do people want to just integrate it into the in-person? Are they going more virtual? What's the trend there?
It totally depends on the person.
Mm-hmm.
Because what, like, my biggest thing is the last thing that I want to help my clients do is build the business that I envision for them. I want to help them build the business that they envision for themselves. And the beauty of the way that we construct these businesses is, for different seasons of life, you can turn the dial on being the person that says, hey, right now my process is going to bias towards more virtual asynchronous, right? Like we work with a lot of expecting moms. We work with a lot of moms who that's like the thing that they're looking to do. They don't want to get out of clinical care, but they don't want to have a process that is so reliant on in person. And so what it allows them to do is it allows them to turn the dial and say, well, maybe I'll just take clients for an eval and then I'll move them straight into a virtual offer. Conversely, I just had a client yesterday that was like, I love doing the in-person side. I think I'm going to put the PEP stuff for later. And like, I have absolutely no problem with that. Mm-hmm. When you talk about going fully online, we do help people with that as well. But it's such a different beast from the blended model.
I can imagine.
Because the biggest thing is the way that you need to warm up, potential clients to work with you. Like, your messaging needs to be super dialed. Your social media presence, you need to be present on social media. And so, a lot of people like the thought of the online business, but like they're not willing to do the work that's required for it. And the reason why like Taylor and Megan, for example, were so successful is like they did the work. They put themselves out there consistently. I think Megan probably has thousands of posts at this point. Like, this doesn't happen overnight, and audience size helps a lot as well. You can kind of get around that with the in-person side because it's so much easier to actually share space with your ideal client.
Yes, I'm glad you brought up the online presence because I do think I get the question a lot. Like, even just how do you have a successful in-person business? Yeah. Do you need an online presence? I think even more so if you want to be solely online, if you're looking for leads, it's all going to be social media, virtually based. You do sort of have to put in the effort. And that is where a lot of people kind of stop in their tracks because the normal mantra is like, oh, I'm just not good at social media. I just don't do it. I don't like it. And so, yeah, that's something that you sort of have to overcome if it's what you want to implement into your practice.
If you scroll back on my Instagram and saw the first reel I ever made, like, I'll tell the story really quick. When reels like came out, I didn't know like how to add audio to them.
Oh, no.
And yeah, it was bad. But like, I am just the kind of person that has like this figure it out mentality. So I literally like found the audio on my computer and like recorded it into my phone. Right. like the point that I'm trying to make here is like, if you want to grow an online business, like you need to be a figure it out person and you need to be willing to put yourself out there, to feel awkward on social media until it no longer does, to refine your messaging. And it's really important that you kind of niche down, even more so important online than in person, that you niche down to a specific audience or you're just screaming into an abyss.
Yeah, I agree. And I think another large barrier to people starting with posting online is it's embarrassing. I was just having this conversation with my friend. She's not a physical therapist, but she's starting a business. And she's like, I'm afraid to make my first post. It's just embarrassing telling people that I'm starting my own thing and that I'm posting about it. And I was like, no, it's not, because no one really cares and no one really sees it until they do. Like, you are going to put in so many reps and post so many times before anybody gets any views on there. And then by the time you get enough views, it's not going to be embarrassing. It's going to be cool. So you just have to kind of bite the bullet and do it for a while.
Well, entrepreneurship and starting your own business is the first time that you're putting yourself out there and saying, I am accepting the possibility to fail publicly,
Yeah, that's a good point.
right? And I think that that stops a lot of people from doing it. And I also hear that, like, starting a business is risky. Well, so is working for somebody else. It's just a different risk that you're accepting. Like for me, when I realized what the path was going to be as a traditional physical therapist and what I was going to make as a director and what the next steps were going to be and, what my life was going to look like, it was just like, that actually seemed like the risky route. So
Yeah.
it helped me kind of nudge into being like, if I want to create something for myself, I can do this in a really protected way. I can do it on the side. I can transition myself out of the clinic. I can work per diem, to make it work. And that's exactly what I did.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I remember having a similar feeling when I was about 1 year into working my corporate PT job and I was watching people do the same job I was doing, but 10, 15 years older. And I was like, is that going to be me? Like, is this my future? Because it is. Because I don't want to be a regional director. I don't even want to be a clinic director. So am I going to be a staff PT just toiling away for the next decade of my life? Or am I going to make a change? And to your point, it is totally feasible to make it a side gig first. You don't have to jump in the deep end. I did, but you don't necessarily have to do that. Like it can be a side gig first and you can kind of wiggle your way into entrepreneurship gradually and it'll feel a lot less risky and a lot less scary, I think.
A lot of people get stuck in like this catch 22, right? Where like they are working full time and their side business is doing well, but they're not making enough money to quit their job, but they don't have enough time to make enough money to then quit their job.
Yes.
So like at some point you have to take a calculated risk, right? And one of the strategies that we teach within our program is like a PRN role is a great risk offsetter. It really allows you to turn the dial on just easy guaranteed money versus, non-guaranteed high upside with your own business. But at the end of the day, like if you're just consistently staying in that pattern of stuck, like how can you ever expect anything to change?
Yeah, it just feels safe and it feels comfy. And I get it. I get why people want to stay there. And I also think it's worth mentioning it's not for everybody to want to go and do their own thing. I think
Yep.
a lot of the online chatter is like the insurance model is dying and it's never going to be the same.
It's not going anywhere.
No, I agree. I think like there is a certain perfect person that's going to do very well and excel in the insurance-based model. And then there's the perfect person for strictly virtual. And then there's the perfect patient that is more so like your 1 or 2% of the population that needs that more one-on-one, maybe a blended practice model. But there are going to be people that work well in every single environment. And just because you work in an outpatient ortho clinic, that's not a bad thing. I don't know. I feel like I kind of need to make that disclaimer because it is a great job. And I mean, although I was ready to leave, I also felt like I had really great experiences during my work, my 2 years of work in that setting.
If you are happy doing what you're doing and like you don't have a problem with anything going on, you don't need to leave just because I have a problem with it.
Yes.
Like that's really important. I think this happens in the business world too, is a lot of people build the business that they think they need to build, right? Because the common, like at the end of the day, the way that traditional cash practices are scaled is the exact same way that insurance businesses are scaled. They are volume dependent. They rely on hiring new people and just building a scalable business in that way. Mm-hmm. But if you don't want to manage people, if you don't want to have the stress in your life of relying on volume, then you need a different model. You need a model that is focused on retention. You need a model that is focused on recurring revenue. You need a model that is focused on extracting more LTV, more lifetime value from each client. And so that's why a lot of solo providers really like the blended practice model, because it gives you a scale via process rather than like a scale via people.
Mm-hmm. You have a strength and conditioning background, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm curious because a lot of physical therapists are great at exercise prescription for a specific issue. Like, okay, you have shoulder instability, you had a dislocation or a subluxation. Here's what we're going to do to make sure that that shoulder gets stable. But I do feel like people might run into the roadblock where they're like, I don't know how to program somebody out necessarily. I don't
Yeah.
know enough about, reps in reserve and how much to load them and when to progress. Do you think that strength and conditioning background is something that someone should pursue if they want to kind of start this blended practice model, or do we already have the tools in our tool belt, we just don't really know how to use it?
So we do have a strength and conditioning course within our program for people that are a little nervous about that. I think that, I think in a weird way, my coaching background and strength and conditioning background was actually almost more valuable than my PT background.
Oh, okay. Explain that.
Because it allowed me to, like, the only thing that changed was my understanding of like orthopedic injuries and navigating surgeries and, understanding tissue healing times and things like that. And that's important, right? But when you get to the point that you're really writing these programs, like, you're typically out of those phases anyways. And so I saw so much more freedom in the coaching realm rather than in the way that physical therapy was performed. So for me, it's like when I operated as a cash-based business, I almost operated more as a coach who was a physical therapist rather than a physical therapist who had a coaching background. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Yeah.
And so I definitely think that, like, when you are comfortable and confident with program construction, linear progression, at the end of the day, like, progressing clients, I think, can be boiled down to, like, there's only three things that we can do for clients. We can either progress them, we can repeat the work to allow the adaptation to happen more slowly, or we can regress them. Like, if you just look at it like there's only three things that I can do here, and the words that your client is putting in this, in their feedback is going to be the one that dictates what you do. Our goal is to simplify that entire process for people. So I talked about how every cash-based business needs a system. Well, every online business needs a system. Every programming process needs a system. So it's a way of thinking throughout that journey. Do I think it's necessary? No, because end of the day, if you can program for that client for a session in your clinic, you should just be able to extrapolate that out to an asynchronous program that they're executing on their own.
Right. And think like, okay, if they're coming to me day one and we're working on this, what is it going to look like in 6 weeks, in 8 weeks? We won't be doing the same thing. What would I be doing at that point?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
we're actually not writing out programs that are like 6-8 weeks at a time. We actually teach, because again, like, we're working with clients that are still kind of in that like middle phase rehab where we're still having to take, feedback and say like, okay, Ronnie, I need to pull you back on volume here. So if I wrote this program too far out into the future and you didn't tolerate the beginning of it well, I'd rather go like week by week or 2 weeks by 2 weeks. So it's not like we're writing this massive cycle. We just have to know where we're going.
Gotcha. I'm curious now, just getting into the specifics of like exercise prescription for people that you're coaching and then that are implementing this into their practice. How many exercises would you say, like, what percentage are very PT specific? Like, okay, we're going to implement the McKenzie protocol because they're having a lumbar radiculopathy versus like, we're just going to load this patient and we're going to do back squats.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it varies, obviously, patient to patient, but do you find that it's more basic, like just gym exercises, or also more like the fine-tuned PT things?
It's definitely, there's a line where it starts to blur. So when I think of like, what are the problems that a home exercise program solves, something like the McKenzie, protocol or something like that, the way that I kind of bucket these things is my HEP is really for like desensitization strategies. It's pretty blanketed, like 3 sets of 10, X amount of time per week. There's not really going to be a ton of like progressive loading in them. But when I get into a prescriptive exercise program, the things that we were doing for the HEP might be part of like the warm up. And then, my prescriptive exercise programs for clients were often single arm high pulls, single arm press, landmine press, kipping work, right? If I'm working with a CrossFitter with shoulder pain, deadlifts, back squats, Olympic weightlifting. Like, it's starting to get more into the things that's their sport. Now, let's take this back. If I was working with somebody who was a golfer, I might be writing their prescriptive exercise program to have, med ball rotational tosses. And then I might be going and programming, hey, you're going to go to the range today and you're going to hit a small bucket of balls. You're going to track how many balls you hit. You're going to hit 50% wedges, and we're just going to see how you go there. And then it might be 100%, and then it might be short irons, long irons, driver. So like all of the protocols and everything that we're using, it doesn't necessarily matter what that person is trying to return to. It's how do I take these principles and apply them to that person's life?
Kind of sounds like fun.
It is really fun.
Yeah,
this was
I
the
like
stuff
it.
that I like doing,
Yeah.
So it was really fun.
So I'm thinking, like, in traditional cash PT setting, the money that I'm bringing in is directly related to the patients that I'm seeing. Like, if I've got 20 patients on the schedule, I'm going to get paid for 20 patients, and that's pretty much it. Can you talk a little bit about like the return of investment on your time in terms of like how much time you're putting into programming for these clients versus how much money you're going to be making? Because I'm imagining it's going to take you less time. Like, you're not going to be seeing this person 2 times a week for an hour. So how does that look in terms of comparing like blended practice model to traditional?
So we think of the time component. Everybody else is thinking of hourly rate, right? Like if your session is $200 a session, it's an hour. That's $200 an hour. Now, if you're doing 30 minutes extra, your effective hourly rate goes down for whatever reason. You're sending them a program, you're sending them an email, you're doing this, you're doing that.
Yeah, it's always more than an hour, isn't it?
Effective hourly rate goes down, right? The moment we attach time to something, it is going to drop effective hourly rate, okay? So what we do for our clients is, let's just say that our clients are selling a prescriptive exercise program for $300 a month, okay? If it takes them 1 hour per month to write that program, effective hourly rate went up to $300. If we can get them more efficient and get them down to 45 minutes per month to write a program, and we're not writing a full fitness program. We are writing like 2 to 3 days of work that are very specific, where all of the heavy lifting is done from the eval, all of the progression is happening, so there's not a ton of time that needs to come into managing these programs. If we can go $300 a month, 45 minutes a month to manage, effective hourly rate has now gone up to $400 per hour. So we actually have a mechanism to scale effective hourly rate. And what we see a lot of cash businesses do is their continuity programs are typically a lower effective hourly rate strategy. So like, people will say, okay, well, now that you're done with your sessions, we're going to bring you in for like a once a month maintenance visit. That once a month maintenance visit is going to be just our lowest session rate. Sure, you're guaranteeing revenue, but you're also cannibalizing a spot on your schedule that could be for a higher client, right? A higher paying client. And if you ever need to take time off, there goes your revenue. If you travel, your trip just got twice as expensive, because now you have to miss out on the opportunity cost of that time, and you have to pay for the vacation. So like I saw this stuff happening to me in my clinic, and I was like, this sucks. Like, I don't want this to happen.
We had another roadblock. Dang it.
And so like, what we focus on is, how do we figure out how to take things that generally give us an accelerant on making more effective hourly rate.
Do you take into account the fact that with these, let's just say you're 100% virtual, do you take into account the probably ongoing messaging with them, emails? I mean, it kind of depends, I guess, on the therapist and what they're willing to, like the guidelines they're putting on how much they communicate with the person, but I'm sure that probably goes into the calculation as well.
It does, but I mean, like, there's ways to kind of make it so that time is doubled up. Mm-hmm. Like when, my business, Engage Movement, is actually run almost exactly like my cash practice. It's blended. There is a blend of, synchronous one-on-one sessions where I meet with my clients. And then there are asynchronous things that we do. There's courses, there's communities, there's messaging, right? And so like for me, like when I'm messaging with my clients, it's almost 90% of the time when I'm out on a walk. So it's like not actually like things that feel like work. It's not me like sitting at my computer doing these things. Again, if somebody says, well, I'm going to sell a $300 program and you're also going to get a 60-minute call with me per month. Well, now if it takes you an hour to write the program and an hour to deliver the call, your effective hourly rate just went down.
Yes. Yeah.
And so this is what I mean when I say other companies do this, but they create this problem a lot because it's like they've detached from the business, but they haven't looked at what the detachment actually does to effective hourly rate.
Okay, effective hourly rate. This is like a new term for me. I've learned. I like this conversation because, like you, I feel like life is just like this ongoing journey, and
Yeah.
I don't ever feel like I'm ever going to be fully settled in what I'm doing in a good way. Not that I'm not satisfied. It's just like, what's next? And so this is a fun conversation for me to have because it's just things that I've not thought of before, really, in
Yeah.
just terms of what I could offer my patients. And that's really what it comes down to. It's like, how can I better serve the population that is coming to see me? And this is what I think would be a really fun tool to implement. So I'm excited about it. I'm curious, how has your opinion of sales changed over the years? Because you graduated in 2014, so it's been 11 years since PT school graduation.
Yeah.
I do some like one-on-one mentoring with people that are trying to get out of the commercial PT space. And oftentimes they're like, I just suck at sales or I
Yeah.
hate sales. And I was kind of the same way, but I've changed. Have you experienced a mindset change in regards to that?
1000%.
Yeah.
If you are going to start a business, you need to learn sales. You don't need to do sales forever, but you need to go through the period where you do sales, you do sales calls, you do sales trainings, because that will create such a deep understanding of what your clients are actually going through so that your marketing can be so good, you no longer have to do sales calls. Like, so one of the big changes that I've made over the last probably like 6 to 8 months is, last year I did probably over 100 sales calls last year, or like, I don't know if it was in the year, but whatever the period of time I was doing
Could you
sales
define
calls.
like what you mean by a sales call too?
Yeah. So our old process, when people would come to work with us, it used to be like a 30-minute intro call, which was part of the sales process, plus a 60-minute sales call where we take you through this conversation and then we present you the offer and then, we make a decision on if we're going to work together. So for every person that went through a sales call, we're looking at like probably 90 to 120 minutes of time on my schedule. That meant like I was working probably, 8-hour days. Like it was pretty typical. But I learned so much through that experience where it's like, what are the actual problems that people are having? What are the thoughts that they're having every day at work? What are the roadblocks that they're running into? What are the challenges that they're having, with the low pay that traditional outpatient orthopedic therapists typically have, or that they've gone into home health for the money and they don't really enjoy like the job, like these trade-offs that people have made. And that's now allowed me to get to a point where like our process no longer has a sales call. It has a 30-minute introductory call so that I'm a real person. We can connect and just talk about making sure that I can help you within your business. And then I just send you over a document with all of the information for you to make a decision. So I've gone from, having 20 plus hours of sales calls on my calendar per week to now per month to now like 2 hours per month. That's a lot of time back. But what's happened through that process is my marketing has gotten so much better because I understand my consumer and my client so much more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you reframe that, sales isn't about convincing somebody to do something. It's about helping lead them to what they feel like is the next best decision for them. Like, that's a really big change. But a lot of people are scared of scripts. A lot of people are scared of asking hard questions. And when you go into cash-based PT, you take away the third-party payer of insurance.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot stay surface level anymore. You need to have a process where you create an environment where your clients feel safe talking about the depth of their problem, talking about the impact it's having on their lives, making them understand like the gap from where you are to where you want to go is big. Like, we need to create some urgency for them to move forward. So yeah, my view of sales has changed massively.
It's a big lesson to learn, especially when you start out somewhere where it's just company policy. Like, we're going to schedule you 3 times a week for
Yeah.
6 weeks and go ahead and check out at the front desk. And it's like, wipe my hands free. I don't have to do any of the uncomfortable stuff.
Yeah.
To then being the face of the business and the one that has to not only complete the evaluation, but also explain what this process is going to look like and why it's worth it. And to your point, not convincing, but leading them to the next correct decision. It's tough, but I think it can be kind of fun if you
Yeah.
like are competitive with yourself, like I am. And it's absolutely necessary to kind of get good at and refine your skills so that it stops feeling like such a task and more so just part of your business.
The going through my sales training was probably like the most intimidating thing that I ever did, where it was like, what do you mean we're going to role play on this call in front of 30 people? But
Oh
like,
yeah, I would be so terrified.
yeah, but like that was part of the, like, if I can do this in front of 30 people and look like an idiot, I can do this with one person to get really good at the process. So 2 things. One, I learned a lot from prior jobs that I had in how I didn't want to run companies, how I didn't want to run sales processes. And I think that was part of the thing that like turned me away from it. And I think a lot of people have also been through sales processes that they didn't like being a part of. And so it's like, if somebody is going to sell you that way, they're going to teach you how to sell that way. So that is probably one of the things that doesn't feel good. And then the second thing is like, you have to find a sales philosophy that actually like resonates with you, because, you know, there are these really hardcore, you either do this or you don't really care about it, you know, kind of this psychological warfare on yourself.
Right.
Or there's like this other end of the spectrum where it's like, what do you actually feel like is holding you back from taking this next step? Like, those are two questions and strategies that people will employ at the same part of a sales process, but they have very different feels to them.
They do. What's yours?
What mine is definitely the latter.
Okay,
But like, what
that's
do you
what I
feel
thought.
like what do you feel like is actually holding you back from the next step? Because I am not afraid to have deep conversations with prospective clients, with existing clients. If you are not the kind of person that, you know, doesn't want to go to like the deep, like, not personal stuff, but like 90% of the people that I work with don't have business problems. They have personal problems that are affecting their business. They have mindset problems that are affecting their business. And
Wow,
so
I'm gonna underscore that. I'm gonna make that into a clip. Yes.
it's true for all of us. It's both the blessing and the curse, right? It's
Yes.
both like I'm the problem and oh crap, I'm the solution, right? But so like if people aren't willing to go deep with me in that process when we're talking about like, what are you really afraid of if you make this commitment, they're probably not going to like my coaching style, because
Yeah.
they're going to get frustrated when I keep giving them strategies and tactics and they're not working, and we don't move through well, what do you really want in life? Like, what do you really want your business to be? Because maybe that's actually part of the problem.
I'm starting to think you're not really a business coach. You're like a life coach. I'm serious.
Now that's the part I need to figure out how to market it as, because I love
Yeah.
talking about that stuff.
Yeah, I that's the vibe that I'm getting from this. Absolutely. So, Ray, the business coach, did you also it sounds like you had your business coach before you started your own business.
Yeah. I've had a
Okay.
lot of I've had a big thing for me is if I'm going to be the person that tells you how important coaching and mentoring is, I need to be the person that always has a coach and mentor.
Hmm.
I've been working with my current mentor for probably about 4 years. He's kind of just like the foundation of like, these are the things that I'm doing. Is there anything that you're like seeing that I'm not, And then throughout the time in my business, I've hired other coaches for like, sales stuff or for how do I make my model easier to implement? How do I make my offer better? How do I make my marketing better? I've worked with various people throughout that journey as well. And I've also had mentors that it's been a bad experience and I still learned a lot of good things. So,
Yeah, you learn from the bad ones too, I'm sure. Yeah, that's good. I kind of wanted to touch on it too, just what your thoughts were on the value of a mentor at any capacity. It doesn't have to be a
yeah.
formal relationship. It could be something that you're paying for. It could be, in my case, it's a friend that went through PT school a year before me and started his own business. And we've been in touch for years at this point. But I feel like it's a very valuable thing because you don't want to feel like a lone wolf. And I definitely, in my experience over the past 2 years, have felt like kind of a loner because I haven't done a formal business training mentorship paid program. And who
Yeah.
knows, maybe I will one day. But I think everybody would benefit from some shape or form of mentorship in some capacity. Like, doesn't matter if you're starting your own business or if you're just a physical therapist. Like, you need that, I think.
It's kind of one of the things that I have really tried to implement in my life is like, how do I become the buyer that I want to attract? And so like if you are the kind of person that always gives money objections, like don't be surprised when you get them.
Mm.
If you are the kind of person that always says you need to think about it, don't be surprised when you try to sell your offer and all your clients need to think about it. If you are the person that is constantly on the edge of indecision and you don't make that move, don't be surprised when you attract those people. Because you can relate to that, right? Like you can relate to like, oh yeah, this is a lot of money. Oh yeah, maybe you do need to think about it. Oh yeah,
Yeah, like
maybe
the
you should
energy you're
stay
putting
slack.
out. Yeah.
But when you put yourself in situations where it's like, well, I'm not going to be the person who gives a money objection. I'm going to be the person who figures out how to do the thing that I want. I'm not going to be the person who thinks about it anymore because I've been thinking about it for the last 2 years. What's there left to think about? Like you be the person that makes that move. So we don't get what we want. We don't attract who we want. We attract who we are. And so like it starts by becoming that person as you're moving through into your own business. And it's crazy what happens when, some of our clients, it's like, hey, what if you just like did this with money? Or what if you just did this with decisions? And they're like, that starts to open things energetically for them, within their own business.
You have now been out for 11 plus years, and all
Crazy.
of the knowledge that you're dropping on this podcast, I feel like is so well curated. Like you've had a lot of time to piece things together and like, solve the puzzle and trial and error things.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about the moment when you were going through your ACL rehab and just how that sort of planted the seed for what is now Engage Movement. Were there any other early career moments where you were like aha moments, like this is what I'm going to do, or this needs to change in my life, things that helped with like a mindset shift almost?
Another big one for me, we kind of touched on this, but another like really big one for me is I really started to understand that like just because something makes you money doesn't always mean it's like a revenue generator for you. So like one day when I started my cash practice, I was working part-time in Division I athletics at that time at University of Nevada. And I just remember walking into the clinic one day and being like, every hour that I'm here costs me $110. I was charging $150 at the clinic. And again, like kind of like you, like I never really had a bad job. Like I loved my first job. I loved the people that I worked with. I loved working at the University of Nevada. I loved like everything that I got to do there, but like it just felt like something was missing. Like it just like wasn't what I was meant to do. And so like when I walked in that day and I was like, man, like being here is costing me money. It was no longer being here is making me $40. It was being here is costing me 110. Like that was a big moment for me. And then you get to your first point where it's like, my first job was I made like 62 grand a year as a PT. Like it was like insanely low.
That tracks.
Right? Oh my gosh. And then like in my business, it was like, well, now I have $5,000 in recurring revenue. I'm making my salary in, a fraction of the time. Like it just like it starts to open your world. As
Sorry.
far as like, that's all good. That's all good. I love the landline. For those of you guys that don't know, like Ronnie has a landline.
Some things, we just keep it classic here. Anyway.
I thought you were dating me back saying I graduated 11 years ago and you're the one with
and
the
I'm
landline.
here like on my landline. Yep.
But all of those little moments I think kind of add up into like, if I want to build the life that I'm really excited about, like Ray has to be in control. That was another big thing that happened to me was there was a time I was telling myself everything was good. I was making a lot of money working for another company, but like I didn't have control over my life. And luckily, like a decision was made for me. I got fired and it was like the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yep.
And so it was like, here we go. Like now we're into this world of untapped possibilities.
Jumping in the deep end.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. My dad tells the story. I don't think I've ever told this one on the podcast, but he worked for a big company for like 30 plus years. And when he got promoted, he tells the story about how he was at this Christmas party and he was talking to a coworker that had been with the company for even longer. And the guy was telling him, you have 5 kids, you have this wife, you have this family. What you need to do at this point is steal back your time from the company. Do whatever you can to get your time back. Basically, and the way that I interpret that is get your life back, because at the end of the day, like time is the most valuable resource that we have and we can never get it back. And so that story was always resonating with me when I was working for a company that took up all of my time. And it was once I was working in the corporate world and realized how really little time I had to myself to do anything that truly I wanted to do that wasn't treating patients. That's when it really started to get the gears going. And I was like, oh, okay, I have to make a change pretty soon. Otherwise, all of my time will be up and I will have worked for somebody else for my entire life. And that's okay for some people, but it did not sit well with me.
The biggest problem I really think I had was how inflexible and how stuck in time everything seemed to be in the PT world. And so like with the internet, like we can just create so much freedom and flexibility for ourselves. Why aren't we tapping into that? And so again, I talked about like how efficiency is a big thing for me. Like if I can make the same amount of money in half the time, why wouldn't I do that?
Yep.
And then how do I figure out how to make twice the amount of money in the same amount of time? Like those are the ways that I'm constantly thinking about business and constantly think about helping our clients scale and ultimately the model that we kind of put into place.
Right. Especially when based off of your clients and business owners, their testimonials, they're like, hey, this is actually working. Our patients are getting better and they've tried everything else. And so not only are you making the same amount of money in half the time or twice the money in half the time, but people are also getting better. And that's really why we got into this business all those years ago in the first place.
Yeah. You add the actual return to sport component that matches an offer medium that matches the actual problem that person has with a virtual offer and them not needing to come into your clinic. I just guarantee your outcomes go up because your client's actually going to get what they need.
I agree. So with Engage Movement, I know you are just like this ever evolving business person.
Yeah.
Is this sort of it for you for the next few years? Do you have a 5-year plan where you have something else in the works, just in terms of either the business you have now or something new?
I used to like try to figure out what my 5-year plan was. And then I went through enough 5 years and realizing that like, that's not how life
It's worthless.
So I'm kind of in the phase of life where like I am doing the things that I want to do and constructing the business in the way that I want to construct it and really making sure that, my business fits around my life and not my life around my business. I'm, 2.5 weeks away from becoming a dad. So like that is a big driver in trying not to have more than like 3-4 hours of work on my calendar per week. And I've dabbled in other businesses and just found that it distracts me from doing the things that I really like to do. And so for now, like this is it. Who knows? Maybe life coaching is my next thing, like you said.
I think so. I think you kind of already are. Yeah. Well, congratulations again on being
Thank
a
you.
parent pretty soon. I'm 4 weeks in and I think it's pretty fun. I was just actually having this conversation with my husband this morning. I was like, I think we're doing okay parenting, but when you have a newborn, you're really not parenting. Like you're just
Yeah.
keeping them afloat. You're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
changing
That's,
diapers and like making
dude,
sure they're
that's,
good.
that's winning. Like that's winning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty chill. I'm like, I'm not disciplining my newborn baby, but we're doing pretty good so far.
That's awesome.
Okay, I always like to end episodes with last question. If you could go back and give your PT school self one piece of advice or just one word of wisdom, what would it be?
You're not going to fit into the box and that's okay. Like the coolest part about getting out into the real world is that right away you're going to figure out if you fit in or not. And like I think that was the big moment for me where it was like, man, these rules were not meant for Ray. Like Ray was not meant for these rules. And I think the more that I have leaned into that, the easier my life and better my life has become.
I love that. Also, for anyone listening, I didn't give him any preparation for that question. You just came right off the bat with your answer. So you were ready for that one.
I've
Very
done a few.
good.
I've done a few podcasts in my days.
Someone's already asked you that question?
No. But I'm just saying. I just know to be ready for anything.
Yeah, you're ready. You're on top of it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Maybe I'll have you on again when you're a parent and we can talk about
Yeah.
how to manage business ownership and parenthood at the same time.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be awesome. All right. Well, good deal. Thanks for coming on.
Ronnie, thank you so much for having me.